An advocate for accused number 5 in the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial has poked holes in the testimony of state witness Tumelo Madlala. The firearm used to gun down the former Bafana Bafana and Orlando Pirates captain in 2014 came into sharp focus in court today. Madlala conceded that he didn't see who shot Meyiwa, as there was a scuffle in the house at the time of the incident.
You have just mentioned that you slightly look at the firearm. How come were you able to look at the firearm and being able to realize that it was old and also rusted?
Ngisho ukuthi umuntu afike ephethe isibhamu ngeke ungasibuki because uma wabona sona isibhamu ubona ukuthi uzobamba inkunzi ngeke ungathuki.
As I've said that I observed at this intruder so that he was in possession of the firearm. Then if you say firearm, there's no way that you cannot be sure because you don't know if he's going to rob you.
You did not have, Mr. Madlala, you did not have enough time to look at the firearm. Let's admit this. Yes.
That's correct.
And what is written here is not correct because you did not pay much attention at the firearm.
But I saw that it was a firearm.
You saw that it was a firearm, but you couldn't see that it was old and rusted. In other words, you couldn't see the detail of that firearm because you slightly looked at that firearm.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, as he's been doing since the resumption of this trial, our reporter Linda Mnisi is standing by with the latest out of court today. So, Linda, will get into the grilling that Madlala continued to face from Advocate Mshololo. But let's begin with what has been the big controversy of the day, the role of the media and the media getting kicked out. What exactly happened to lead to all of this?
Well, Kathy, you'll remember that the media has been granted access to broadcast the proceedings in this matter, and for broadcasters like us, television broadcasters, what then happens was that a pool feed was given to all the broadcasters. It's controlled by the public broadcaster. So essentially what happened today was that the camera was tracking the judge as the court adjourned, and as it was moving, tracking the movement of the judge who was exiting the court, the witness, being Tumelo Madlala, inadvertently stood up and came into the shot, and that's how his face got onto the television screens. What you saw there, the judge saying that what he needs to know is the person that could have been behind this, that person needed to be identified and therefore excuse themselves from this particular case. The judge quite clear about the fact that members of the media will not continue with the broadcast unless that person is identified and leaves the court. So essentially, that is the reason why broadcasters as well as members of the media across the board, be it radio or print, were unable to go into court and document the proceedings for that hour after lunch.
It sounds like it was an honest mistake that was made here, and given the fact that these are live proceedings, often very difficult to move quickly, especially when it comes to things like camera movements. What did the judge have to say about the explanation he was given?
Well, you'll remember at the time, the investigations were ongoing at the time, and it was really to establish when this thing happened and whether it was true or not, at what time it happened. And the advocate, or the state advocate, could not give a clear answer as the investigations were ongoing in court around what could have really happened. And the judge was quite clear around his stance on this matter. He will not continue with members of the media present in court, if that person does not excuse themselves from that point onwards, then it was better for, he said it was better for all members of the media across the board to exit. Seemingly quite unhappy about the situation, Kathy, obviously, because it does in fact impact on the trial and whether or not it continues. So what he was stern about is the fact that the case will not be stalled by this issue. It will, in fact, continue with or without members of the media.
So what happens now then, Linda? What was the way forward?
The way forward, Kathy, was for the person identified for what happened to be presented to the judge and then removed from that particular case. That is something that's currently being facilitated between the state as well as, of course, the broadcasters that are involved in that particular matter. So going forward, then we'll hear whether that process did take place. But it seems post that, procedure that the judge ordered, then members of the media will be able to continue broadcasting that case. You'll remember, he did not say that he's banning the media from ever covering the case. What he said was that he wanted that particular person responsible for what happened to be removed from the case. And without that happening, members of the media cannot come back to court. So when that person is identified and taken to the judge, then members of the media can continue with the case. It's still continuing. It will continue tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning.
So then, Linda, many people, of course, would want to know how this then is going to affect their ability to see the trial as it unfolds real time while this matter is being attended to.
Indeed, Kathy, there's been great interest in this particular matter, and it's one of the things that legal representatives continue to highlight around balancing the interest of justice and as well as public interests, and not for the other to impede on the other. So it's a case now of trying to balance the two and finding a way to work with the court, members of the media, access to justice, access to the courts, not only for members of the media, but for the public who can't come and witness these proceedings for themselves. You'll remember there are families also here who are interested, the families of the accused, as well as the family of the deceased Senzo Meyiwa, who are not in court. Well, his mother at least is not in court. She's in KwaZulu-Natal. So that will definitely impact their interest in this particular matter. But it seems as though all indications are pointing to the fact that there's now a need to balance the interests of justice as well as public interest.
Well, let's talk then about what you were able to see while you were still in that courtroom. And, of course, it was the continuation of cross-examination of Tumelo Madlala, Senzo Meyiwa's friend, and still facing quite a grilling in as far as not only what he claims happened that night, but the nature, again, the strength of his friendship with Meyiwa also coming under scrutiny.
Indeed, the friendship is still one of the things that comes up in court, Kathy, particularly when it comes to his participation in the Netflix documentary. You'll remember that he was interviewed by the producers of that Netflix documentary, which aired just before the trial got underway early this year. And he says for his participation in that Netflix documentary, he was given money. Now, the defense going further and taking that matter further, you'll remember yesterday he indicated that he did not share the money with Senzo Meyiwa's family, but then the defense taking it forward and saying, well, because you did not share the money with Senzo Meyiwa's family, his brothers, for example, or his mother, let's talk about, his fiancée at the time. We know that he had a fiancée, he had a child at the time. Did you let them know about your participation in this Netflix documentary? And he said, well, he did not let them know. And the next question was, did you then share the proceeds of that documentary with the family, given the fact that you only cared about, Senzo and not his family? But did you share those proceeds with his wife? And he said, well, he didn't, because according to his understanding, Mandisa could take care of herself. And he was then asked, Mandisa is now the fiancé, Kathy, he was then asked, did you at least share that amount or that money with the child? who had lost, obviously, the father who was known throughout his family as a breadwinner, and he said he didn't. In fact, the judge coming in there and asking a very critical question. So if you were very close to Senzo, wouldn't you regard your child, or in fact, wouldn't you regard Senzo's child as your own, given the fact that yesterday you indicated to the court that, you had 6 or more children, more than 6 children. Wouldn't you then regard this child to be your own? And he said, yes, but he still did not share the money with the child and did not share the money with any of his family members. So according to him, he took it all for himself.
Let me bring in legal analyst Mpumelelo Zikalala into this conversation. Mpumelelo, we've seen Advocate Mshololo on behalf of one of the accused, of course, almost tease out this argument around the kind of friend that Tumelo Madlala was. Now, it's not unheard of, especially globally, for individuals to be paid for special content that they may have with persons of interest, etc. What is the state really trying to do here? And why is it so significant in a South African context? Because I am mindful of the fact that perhaps we as South Africans are not used to what we're seeing with Tumelo Madlala happen locally, but certainly not unheard of internationally.
Definitely. And I think the context we're going to debate, or they want to do with the credibility of the witness. From the defense's side, they're basically saying you are very selective when it comes to the information that you want to bring forward in a forum which is supposed to bring on justice for the friend or the person that you regarded as your friend and as any reasonable person would want to happen. At the end of the day, those that brought this particular hardship to your family, those that brought this particular hardship to your friend and his family should be brought to book. And if you want to achieve that, then tell the truth all the time. Now, you can't have another version within a Netflix documentary and another one when it comes to court. And as it would be, in the spirit of Ubuntu, you then say, my intention was not to make money out of your tragedy. However, my intention was that the truth comes out. And as part of that, or in a manner in which I'm trying to show how sincere I am in these particular instances, I'm going to share any of the proceeds that I've received with the family. Now, the case, in this case, what the defense is trying to say is, Honorable Court, please look at the credibility of this particular witness. He is not a witness who acts and behaves as a friend would have behaved. Hence, don't attach too much weight to his evidence because we don't know what his true intentions are in this case. He has provided information before, it was purely for monetary basis. He may provide information now, and it could be purely just to exonerate himself and to show himself as an innocent person.
One also gets the sense that the defense is approaching the cross-examination of Madlala as somebody who's likely a suspect to this matter, more, especially if you listen more and more to the kind of questions that Advocate Mshololo is asking, and you almost take a look at the bigger picture here.
Definitely. Let's remember that the work or the job of Advocate Mshololo was achieved earlier on, because Advocate Mshololo is representing accused number 5. So if you then say, did you see accused number 5 on that particular day? And the response is no. That means you've done your job. That particular witness is not going to say anything else which is going to involve or implicate your client in this particular instance. But what Advocate Mshololo is doing is then saying, I want to extend my line of questioning to your credibility. I want to show that how untruthful you are. But most importantly, I also want to show the lack of the experience or the manner in which the law enforcement agencies, in this case, the investigation officer has investigated this particular matter. It was not in a manner in which it ought to be investigated in. There are a lot of loopholes that are there. I'm trying in all circumstances and instances to show the inadequacies in this investigation that has taken place. And I'm doing all of that to discredit whatever line of questioning, whatever line or story that is going to come from the state, so that I can be able to plant instances of doubt in the story or the line of the submissions that you provided by the state. So she's gone beyond the protection of her clients, and now she's saying, let me go further. I want to expose the inadequacies of the investigation in this matter, and that can only to lead to one conclusion, that the 5 men that are in the accused box are not really the perpetrators that should be there. There's a lot of other explanations that may be there, and even you sitting in the witness box can even be the accused in the next part of the trial.
Linda, let's come back to this very issue of witnesses and ultimately who pulled the trigger, because that was a very pointed question that Madlala was asked. What was he able to say about what he saw, who he saw, and how much of what he said when first giving evidence has been consistent to the end of today?
Well, Advocate Mshololo has been exploring the evidence given by Tumelo Madlala in terms of what happened inside the house. You'll remember in the bite that we played earlier on how he described the gun, saying it was rusty and it looked like an old gun. So she went into detail around what exactly Tumelo Madlala saw, because you'll remember he said that they had been drinking inside the house and this intruder came in, and then there was another one who was in the kitchen. He went as far as detailing what he saw from the first intruder, saying he saw that the first intruder had a gun, but when Longotwala ran out of the house, what then happened is that when he tried to do the same, that's when he realized that Senzo Meyiwa was also in the kitchen, pinning the second intruder against the wall with using the right arm. Now, what was happening behind that scuffle then was three women, Kelly Khumalo, Zandi Khumalo, and their mother, now allegedly assaulting this intruder who had a gun. Tumelo Madlala says a shot then went off, which he then presumes happened behind them. Now, he was asked, because you were in the kitchen and the intruder that had the gun was behind you, were you able to tell who pulled the trigger, who fired the shot? Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I am saying to you, the three people who were fighting with the person carrying a gun, you did not go there. You did not even see how the incident, the struggle between themselves unfolded. Do you understand it?
Uyawuzwa kahle umbuzo ukuthi ke labantu abathathu bebalwa naye lo muntu ophethe isibhamu, wena azange uye lapho futhi azange ubone ukuthi ngesikhathi balwa lapha kugcine kwenzakalani ngesikhathi ba struggle bobathathu. That's correct?
Thank you. That's what I was asking for. And you did not see who fired shots.
And azange ubone ukuthi ngubani odubulile.
You have already answered that question.
All right, Kathy, and that bite really reveals, in fact, some of the things that happened inside the house, but it also brings about questions around, who could have fired that shot. But also, you'll remember the charge sheet tells us that Senzo Meyiwa was shot from the front and the bullet came in from the front. So now the question is, if the person or the person that had the gun in the house was behind Senzo Meyiwa, how do you then explain the fact that the charge sheet says that the shot was fired from the front, it entered the front and exited through the back?
All right. Linda Mnisi, will have to leave it there for tonight alongside Mpumelelo Zikalala. Let me thank you both for joining us this evening.